right, so let's talk about the interaction between our genes, our heredity, and the environment. So none of our traits are ever really nature or nurture. It's an interaction between nature and nurture, an interaction between heredity and environment. Most traits are polygenic, meaning that the instructions come from many different genes. I gave an example in the last video about eye color and talking about one dominant gene. Most traits like intelligence and personality, these instructions for those traits come from many different genes. It's not as simple as just one set of genes that will determine your personality or your intelligence. You have instructions coming from all sorts of different genes. So that's called polygenic, meaning many genes are involved in most of the traits that make up our development. Two terms I want to spend some time on is genotype and phenotype. Genotype refers to your genetics instructions that don't change. It's what you're born with. You're born with these genes that have these instructions on them, and you can never change your genes. They're set for life. But what does change is your phenotype, the turning on and the turning off of genes. This turning on and turning off of genes happens through the influence of the environment. Our environment influences our genes. This is called epigenetics. Okay, so maybe you have the gene for high intelligence, okay? Maybe the instructions are in there for high intelligence, but you live in this environment where you are not being stimulated, you're not being educated, you're not being spoke to, things of that sort. You live in an environment that is not conducive to creating a child of high intelligence. So your phenotype of intelligence may not be as high as your, say, instructions, your genetics instructions say it should be. So our environment determines if our genes get turned on and turned off. Alcoholism, let's take that as an example. Maybe you have the genotype for alcoholism, but maybe your environment, you live in an environment where you have lots of social support. It was some alcoholism and drinking and things like that were nothing that were very encouraged in your environment, so you never end up becoming an alcoholic. So your phenotype is what actually gets expressed, okay? So you might have the gene for alcoholism or a gene for high intelligence, but depending on your environment, that gene may be expressed or not expressed. A neat website where you can learn some more about epigenetics and this interaction between our genes and our environment, this turning on or turning off of our genes, is this site right here. Just type into your Google browser or your Google search engine, Lick Your Rat in genetics, and this website should come up, Lick Your Rats. And your site will look something like this. Give you some information. You can play this video over here that will tell you a little bit about epigenetics. And then you can do this simulation with licking your rat. So you're going to act as if you're a rat mother, and you're going to turn on or turn off a gene for calmness and anxiety. If you lick your rat a lot, if you give a lot of nurturing to your rat. So it's kind of just a cool little simulation of the interaction between nature and nurture. I recommend you check it out. Another part of this interaction between our environment and our genes is niche picking, or when we seek out experiences that fit our genes or our instructions. If we tend to be more introverted genetically speaking, then we are going to seek out experiences that allow us to be a little bit more introverted. So it's not just that our environment changes our genes also influence our environment or influence our experiences, and that's called niche picking, picking out experiences that kind of go along with who you are genetically speaking. I also want to touch on how twins are made. So you have identical twins and you have fraternal twins. And the names for identical twin is called monozygotic. So remember, a zygote is a fertilized egg. You have an egg that gets fertilized by a sperm. So here's the egg that's been fertilized by a sperm. Here's the little spermie. Here's the egg. It gets fertilized, and you have this one zygote that then splits into two identical zygotes. Kind of through like mitosis when it's copying, but instead of kind of sticking together, these two cells sticking together, they split into two individual zygotes, two individual beings. So these two zygotes are exactly identical. They have the same genes. And that's a monozygotic twin, identical twin. Mono meaning one, zygote, one fertilized egg that breaks into two. So they're going to have the same genetic makeup, meaning that if this zygote is XX is a female, when they break in two, they're both going to be female. You cannot have identical twins of opposite sex. The identical twins will always be the same sex because they have the same exact genetic makeup. They have the same genotype, all right? The same genetic instructions. Now, dizygotic are fraternal twins. Really, they're just regular old siblings. You have two eggs, and the two eggs that were released in the mother are both fertilized. That makes two zygotes, or two fertilized eggs. And these two fertilized eggs, these two zygotes, dizygotic twins, will develop into two separate babies. So it's really just having two siblings inside of a mother at the same time. Two eggs that get fertilized by two sperm. And this happens a lot with fertility treatment, because fertility treatment usually results in more than one egg being released per month. And identical twins tends to happen more, it tends to run in families more. Hereditability studies are done to find out how much a trait is inheritable and how much of it comes from the environmental experiences. Twin and adoption studies really help us to gain an understanding of how much a trait is nature and how much is nurture. Concordance rate refers to the probability that one twin has the trait that another twin has. The concordance rate of if one identical twin is homosexual, the concordance rate that the other identical twin will be homosexual is about 50%. So it's higher than what the concordance rate would be for fraternal twins, which is about 25%. So it shows that possibly homosexuality has a genetic component to it, but more studies are needed to really be able to give some more insight. Studies on twins that are raised apart, and they tend to be very similar, this suggests that there's a strong genetic influence to whatever that trait is. Adopted kids that are more alike, say, to some trait, more alike with their adopted parents, this suggests that there's some sort of strong environmental influence to whatever trait it is that we're looking at. Identical twins, they have the same genes, and if they're living together, they're being raised by the same parents and things like that, they have the same environment to a certain extent, but they're still different in certain ways because of a non-shared environment. Maybe one twin has one teacher and another twin has a different one. Maybe one twin has an opportunity to go to soccer training and the other one doesn't have that opportunity. So these non-shared environment, those non-shared experiences is what makes those identical twins that live together in the same home and have the same parents, that's what makes them different.